Welcome to the Still Curtain podcast. I'm Josh Yourish, and today we're going to talk about the Steelers winning the AFC North against the Baltimore Ravens. It's Monday, January 5th, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are set to host the Houston Texans in the AFC wildcard round a week from today. Obviously, last night, a remarkable win over the Ravens that will be etched into the history of that great rivalry, with a lot of twists and turns, and wasn't necessarily the prettiest, but the Steelers are now heading to the playoffs after finishing the regular season at 10-7. We're going to do a little Steelers Ravens deep dive to start things off, not as extensive as we typically do on a Monday afternoon, because we have to turn our attention to the playoff game at hand. There's things to unpack from this matchup, what the Ravens do going forward, if they are actually going to move on from John Harbaugh, and maybe a split with Lamar Jackson is to come. A few notes from the game as well, and then we got to turn our attention to the Texans. And I think there's a lot from the matchup last night and the last couple of weeks that will be instructive for that matchup, and what the Steelers game plan is going to look like and needs to look like to have a shot against one of the hottest teams in the NFL that looks like a legitimate Super Bowl contender. So we'll start with the Steelers defense against the Ravens offense, and just some notes from that, what it looked like. Obviously, in the first half, things looked in the first half, it was the Ravens game plan that they wanted to get to, clearly running the crap out of the ball with Derrick Henry, and they did it fairly well in the first half. In the second half, it's hard to tell, even, digging into the numbers and things more. Did the Steelers really shut off the water for the Ravens in the run game? Or did the Steelers just hold the ball for so long, have the TJ Watt interception that took away a Ravens possession early in the second half? And is that what did it? What shut down the Ravens run game? Simply not having the ball, and then once they did, trailing and having to chase things a little bit and opening things up for Lamar. Well, either way, because I think the Steelers did a good job against the run. Like, Cam Heyward was dominant. Unbelievable performance from Cam Heyward. 5 run game stops. It felt like more. He was everywhere, two-gapping like crazy and just throwing interior offensive linemen for the Ravens around. Derek Harmon plays a big role in that. I think you see, like, Keanu Benton still playing a ton of nose snaps, especially they're playing a lot more base. You would love for him to be like a 3 technique penetrator, because that's what he is. Like, he's just not a nose. He's a little light in the pants for that. Still gets washed out some. But when you have Heyward and Harmon next to him, it really changes things. And I runs to the interior. The Ravens had a lot more problems than, every once in a while they got outside. And that's just going to happen with Derrick Henry. He's one of the best running backs ever in the NFL. But I felt like the Steelers did a good job against the run, and they've done a good job against the run down the stretch of the season. Like, the final few weeks of the season, since the Steelers made this change to play like a ton of base 3-4 and turn the clock back to the mid early 2000s, they've been number 1 in the NFL in DVOA against outside zone runs, near the top in terms of inside zone runs as well. That's what the Ravens want to do a lot of. They match really well against heavy personnel, which the Ravens want to do a lot of, which the Lions wanted to do a lot of, which the Browns wanted to do a lot of. So this game plan was, that game plan that you saw down the stretch was both bespoke for the matchups, but also just generally more effective than what the Steelers were over the course of the season. But I think that you started to see some of the cracks in the Steelers' kind of reworked defensive philosophy in the second half of this game, when the Ravens finally did get the ball back after the Steelers possessed the crap out of it in the third quarter. They opened things up. The Ravens do not play a lot of 11 personnel. I think they're 32nd in the league in 11 personnel rate, but they had to do it a lot more down the stretch. That forced the Steelers to put some lighter bodies on, or decide, are we going to stay with this heavy personnel stuff? The solution was to blitz Lamar a lot, Lamar has historically been one of the best against the blitz. This year, he struggled with pressure a ton just because he hasn't been the same mobile runner, scrambler that he typically has been. So it's not like a terrible strategy, but he absolutely torched them. The Steelers blitzed Lamar on 11 of his 21 snaps. And I feel like we overlooked this a little bit last night because on the Instant Reaction pod, and go check that out if you haven't, because the Steelers won the game and just all the craziness that happened. The defense completely fell apart in the fourth quarter. And so did the Ravens defense. But they had a better explanation for it with Kyle Hamilton going down, and we'll get to that more. The Steelers blitzed Lamar on 11 of his 21 snaps, and he went 7 for 9 for 207 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's 23 yards per attempt, a perfect 158.3 passer rating. You're already putting big bodies on the field. Now you're bringing more and having less in traffic in cover, less traffic in coverage, especially you've been playing a lot of zone, taking bodies out of those zones by blitzing. You just cleared up the picture for Lamar. There were times they had him dead to rights, right? Like the first Zay Flowers touchdown. The Steelers had Lamar dead to rights, and Alex Highsmith couldn't bring him down. Sometimes that's just Lamar being Lamar. But I think there is a concern that you're making this trade-off to play with heavier personnel to stop the run. And what you give up is typically explosive passes. They've been able to balance on that razor's edge for the final weeks of the season because the teams they've played have been heavy personnel teams, run heavy teams. So it's just matched up pretty well. And they've gotten by, not giving up a ton of explosives. And when they have, they've limited the damage in the red zone and things like that. There's no red zone snaps when Zay Flowers is, just jaunting into the end zone and Patrick Queen is helpless to chase him down, or when Zay Flowers is completely wide open off of a play action fake where Asante Samuel bites as hard as anyone has ever bit on a play action fake to give up the second of Flowers' fourth quarter touchdowns, or second half touchdowns. The first one, I don't know if it was the fourth quarter, but it doesn't matter. So when the Ravens went more spread, when they had to throw the ball, they killed the Steelers. That's going to be problematic against offenses, and the Texans might be one. We're going to get to that want to do that from Jump Street, right? Like, what happens when you get matched up with a heavy 11 personnel team, with a team that's going to say, we'll spread you out. You want to play this base stuff? All right, we're going to get the ball out of our hands quickly. We're going to hit explosives. We can block it up long enough against your blitzers that you can't get us down. CJ Stroud isn't a Lamar athlete, but he's a good mover. He's got his scramble rate is ticked up a little bit this year. So you can't just play, try to blanket man coverage, especially that's not a great strategy against Higgins and Nico Collins. I think that could be problematic. Like, that is the weakness of this defensive philosophy. You see it get exposed, and it's hard to ignore that and kind of wave it away when that's the first offense that's been, put in that position and had the pieces to actually spread you out that way and take advantage of things, because like the Lions they can go spread. They have the receivers to do it. They have a quarterback that can be super accurate, but when they're doing that, they're sacrificing a lot in protection, and their interior offensive line was just such a nightmare. They still were going to get eaten alive. So the Ravens survived it because Lamar's a great, mover in the pocket, able to evade sacks, and he made the Steelers pay for it. And that is, all the machinations of how this game ended. It was just wild. And the Steelers, you could argue should have lost. You could argue they should have won by more without a terrible play call at the end of the first half on the goal line. Like, it's a classic Steelers-Ravens game. But that's something meaningful I'm taking from it, not just the chaos and everything. Okay, we finally saw somebody hit the pressure point and everything kind of crumbled. So maybe the Texans, I know the Texans are going to watch that and go, all right, there's our game plan right there. 11 personnel, we're spreading you out. We're going to hit play action shots. And again, we'll get into more of that as we go, but that is absolutely troublesome. If I'm the Steelers coaching staff, and a win doesn't mean that those problems aren't there. On the other side of the ball, the Steelers did so much of their damage. So, like, the question, I guess, is DK Metcalf coming back with Rodgers playing better down the stretch. Is this a functional offense that can win in the playoffs? Is this quarterback play that can get it done against better defenses like the Houston Texans, which I think, for my money, is the best defense in the AFC? Maybe the Browns, but best, like, real defense in the AFC. Can you get it done against that type of unit? It's a hard question to answer when 195 of Rodgers' 294 yards on 47 passing attempts against the Ravens came after the catch. The Steelers finally got a screen game going. They've never gotten a screen game going for years and years and years. They averaged over 6 yards per attempt on screens for the game, and on a high volume. They threw a lot of them. They did a good job breaking tackles. Jalen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell were massive, right? Just anytime they were in space, they at least made somebody miss. Marlon Humphrey had a brutal day as a tackler. There are other Ravens as well that kind of didn't feel like they were up for that physicality, especially on the perimeter. And I think that's part of the reason that the Steelers did so much of that stuff, did so much of the swings and screens and perimeter stuff, partially to try to, I don't know that this was an explicit goal, but when you do that, it tires out defensive linemen because they have to run, they have to play those, things to the perimeter. It's not so much as like an air raid offense in college, because the hash marks are wider in college. So those defensive linemen have to run a lot further, and you're not allowing them to sub by playing no huddle. But the Steelers did a lot of the sugar huddle stuff, did a lot of like try not to let them sub. The Ravens just don't have much of a pass rush to begin with. So if you tire those guys out, you're really slowing them up. You're giving Rodgers more time in the pocket when he has to take shots downfield. And I think that was part of the game plan. But also that game plan gets a whole hell of a lot easier when Kyle Hamilton goes down with a concussion. So per Next Gen Stats, and Chris Muller had this on Blue Sky, friend of the program, Chris Muller from 93.7 The Fan. With Hamilton in the game, the Steelers offense averaged 3.9 yards per play, had a 37% success rate, and a negative 0.27 EPA per play. That's on 38 plays. After Hamilton went out, the Steelers offense averaged 6.9 yards per play. That's 3 yards more, had a 60% success rate. That's 23% better, and had a positive 0.44 EPA per play, which is just absurd efficiency. And that's on 35 plays. So like almost an even split, and it just astronomically better numbers across the board when Kyle Hamilton went out. It shows you the value of a player like Kyle Hamilton, who I think is, probably the best safety in the NFL, if not one of the maybe best. I think you can make a very convincing argument that Kyle Hamilton is the best non-edge rusher in the NFL, because those players are just inordinately valuable and always going to get the nod for, defensive player of the year and things like that. Myles Garrett's obviously going to win it this year, setting the sack record. But Hamilton is up there and should be in the DPOY conversation year in and year out. And because of that, like it's a problem to lose Hamilton against anyone. I think it's uniquely problematic against a team that wants to do so much in the screen game, in the yards after the catch game, because the Ravens have gotten Ardarius Washington back. They traded in the middle of the season for Alohi Gilman. Malachi Starks was back healthy and made a couple of plays. So they have more deep safeties to play that allows Kyle Hamilton to come down around the line of scrimmage. And I don't know exactly what his usage was. I can find it here quickly. But his ability to do that, to be a force around the line of scrimmage, to be in the slot as a nickel and a kind of a tackler there, to be a pass rusher, is incredibly valuable. So looking at his snap distribution, he had 6 snaps on the defensive line, 16 in the box, 7 at free safety, 9 in the slot, and 1 at corner. So like he was all over the place, and particularly around the line of scrimmage. So that's just going to get him involved as a tackler, as a blitzer, everything. He had 9 tackles, only missed 1, 3 stops in the game. He was targeted 7 times, only allowed 33 yards. Like, he's just such a valuable player in so many different facets for that defense, and losing him really kind of took away their queen on the chessboard. And you need that player even more when you don't have that pass rusher, right? Like the pass rusher, the edge rusher is the most valuable player on defense. I would say maybe like a dominant interior guy like Aaron Donald, but those guys are just so few and far between that it's not a real conversation against like a Myles Garrett. But when you don't have one, and Baltimore doesn't, their sack leader finished the year with 4.5 sacks, I think, then you need him doubly, triply, right? And they didn't have him. The bottom fell out of that defense. The Steelers were able to take advantage of it with a ton of yards after the catch, forcing Humphrey and Starks and these other guys to tackle. They didn't really want to all that much. There were a good number of missed tackles, 13 missed tackles for the Ravens in the game. That matters as well, because it's easy to stride into the playoffs thinking Rodgers is playing his best ball in a while. That is true. The Steelers get DK Metcalf back. That is true and very impactful. Even if the Texans, can take away a number 1 wide receiver with Derek Stingley, Kamari Lassiter is very good on the other side as well. But it just has like gravity in the passing game and is just going to force them to roll coverages more and allocate more defenders. It just changes the geometry of things in the passing game. But all of that being said, like, it's a massive caveat to the performance that Hamilton was out, and nearly everything that the Steelers did well happened after he went down with that concussion. I thought Rodgers played well, but it's against a defense that, bottom of league in pressure rate. The Steelers have only played 4 top 10 defenses by pressure rate. They're 2-3 in those games. The wins are over the Browns and the Vikings. Luckily for them, the Texans don't rank in the top 10 in pressure rate. Some of that is because how little they blitz. And just D'Amico Ryan's playing like the wide 9, 4 down front stuff. He's just not going to get too exotic with it because he knows his guys can maul up front. I don't know that you can win in the playoffs. Maybe you can win a game because anything can happen in a game, but like actually win in the playoffs with the type of quarterback play that Aaron Rodgers is giving the Steelers, with nothing as a scrambler, which just becomes so important in matchups in the playoffs, being able to get those little yards, able to avoid negative plays and like turn what could be a sack into a 3-yard gain. That becomes immensely valuable in the postseason. Without any element of that, and with so much coming underneath and after the catch, I have a hard time seeing the Steelers. And furthermore, Rodgers struggles against pressure. Like I mentioned, the 2-3 record against those top 10 pressure teams. Even against a team that's near the bottom in pressure rate, Rodgers still went 2 for 8 for 31 yards when pressured, with a 20% pressure rate, and didn't do much against the blitz either. Like Collinsworth on the broadcast said he talked to Rodgers, and Rodgers said, I'm begging them to blitz me. Because, great quarterbacks, they do torch the blitz. It takes bodies out of coverage. It clears up the picture for them. They can throw into voids. Rodgers averaged 3.5 yards per attempt against the Ravens when he was blitzed. Draymond Jones was the only Ravens player with over a 10% pass rush win rate. The Texans this season have 2 players over 20% pass rush win rate per PFF and have 7 players over 10% win rate. Like, this is a different level of pass rush that Rodgers is going to be facing. For the season, Rodgers is 38th in EPA per dropback against pressure, according to FTN Fantasy. Of 40 eligible quarterbacks, Flacco and Geno Smith are the only 2 that are worse. I want to be optimistic, and I actually found reason for optimism about the Steelers defense against the Texans offense as we pivot to that. But I have a lot of concerns about what Rodgers can do against the Texans defense. That's one of the best in football. We'll start on the other side of the ball because I was surprised by how good of a matchup it actually could be. For the Steelers to win this game, it's got to be low scoring. The Texans don't mind playing those games because they have one of the best defenses in the NFL again. But for the Steelers they have to just drag CJ Stroud and the Texans offense down into the mud. They have to get some turnovers. They have to limit drives. They have to be really good in the red zone, field goals, not touchdowns kind of thing. This is simplistic stuff, but it becomes even more important when you don't have faith in the offense to just match blow for blow. And I don't think the Steelers can just shut everything off for the Texans offense. They've been playing a lot better. The offensive line, which was a massive problem last season and earlier in the year, has gotten better. It's not one of the best offensive lines in the NFL by any stretch of the imagination, but they're just like a lot more competent picking up stunts and blitzes and exotics. Last season, they couldn't do it at all. It was just free rushers like crazy. And that's a big reason CJ Stroud took a step back in his sophomore season. This year, they can at least pick that stuff up competently. And they're a young group that's, I would say, gotten better throughout the year. I still think like short yardage stuff, they have problems because they can't just turn around and hand it off. That's also a symptom of, Nick Chubb taking a lot of carries for this team this season and Woody Marks obviously taking over the lion's share of them, but not being like a proven guy in the backfield. But the Texans still, even with their offensive line problems, CJ Stroud has been playing so much better. He's been looking like the rookie version of himself. His time to throw is the lowest of his career, which is a good thing for CJ Stroud. When he sees it, he's comfortable and he's just like firing. That's a scary player because of his accuracy, his aggressiveness over the middle of the field. He has like 132.5 passer rating, 10 to 19 yards downfield between the numbers. That's the honey hole. Like that's where you're going to hit a lot of explosives, especially with guys like Higgins and Collins, who are big physical receivers and aren't afraid to take hits over the middle of the field. So I'm afraid of CJ Stroud in a one game situation. And he's a guy who has won playoff games before. The Texans, to the matchup that's most interesting to me, the Steelers have found a lot of success playing their 3-4 base stuff in the final weeks of the season, right? They've gotten bigger, 3 down linemen. It allows them to just like 2 gap, prevent any outside zone run stuff because they have Highsmith and now Watt setting edges. Herbig getting involved as well, though he didn't play as many snaps as I would have liked against the Ravens. But the Texans flipped the script on that completely. Houston is uses the 6th highest rate of 11 personnel in the NFL. Out of that 11 personnel, they're 14th by EPA per play. Not gaudy, but a good number. 9% higher than league average usage for 11 personnel. The Ravens, as I mentioned, 32nd in 11 usage. The Lions, 17th. So they can do it, but didn't have a ton of success with it a few weeks ago. The Browns, 27th, and the Dolphins, 30th. So this resurgence down the end of the stretch, it's because they made this change. It's because they've gotten more creative with dropping linebackers and sim pressures and different coverage looks. But it's also because they've played a string of offenses that uniquely allow them to do that and do that very often. The Texans aren't going to do that. All the heavy personnel teams late in the season made it possible to turn the clock back to that stuff that may have an expiration date. The Texans are 31st in the NFL in 12 personnel usage. They don't put 2 tight ends on the field very much. The Steelers are right at league average EPA versus 11 personnel. The Texans are 22nd in EPA per rush out of 11. So they're not running the ball great when they are out of 11. Like, you think the Rams, do a great job of that. But the Steelers, if they have to go nickel, it seems like they'll have to go nickel a lot more than they have in recent weeks. I thought that was going to be a massive concern because part of the thought process, at least in my mind, with going to more base, going to more 5-down fronts is not only are you playing to a good matchup against heavy personnel teams, you are also putting more of your better players on the field. Keanu Benton, Derek Harmon, Cam Heyward. You have more snaps for your edge guys. You know, Sawyer getting run, Herbig getting run, but also like Highsmith and Watt. Your strength of your defense is your D-line and your edges. So just put more of those guys out there more often. And I think that's part of why they've played better as well, instead of more snaps for Asante Samuel and for Brandon Eccles, who's been good this year, but not unbelievable. And even Ramsey and all the issues they've had at safety, more Chuck Clark snaps. Like, I'd rather just have a big body out there than Chuck Clark in the box, even if it is the, nickel matchup that you would want to have against 11. But they're going to have to play more nickel on Monday night. Surprisingly, at least to me, they've been better in nickel than I would have expected. In nickel, they're 8th in DVOA against the run, which I would not have thought at all because I don't like their secondary as tacklers. I really don't like their run fits for Joey Porter Jr., though hard to criticize him. He's been playing much better as of late, and he's a good tackler because of his length and some physicality, but I don't think he's always just doing the right thing. And on the other side, you have Pierre, you have Asante Samuel, like not very big players. It's the Steelers nickel defense is also 12th in passing DVOA, 16th in success rate, 10th in explosive pass. Not amazing by the success rate and explosive stuff, but the DVOA number per FTN Fantasy, which again is defense value over average. So it's defense adjusted numbers for efficiency. The Steelers look really pretty good out of nickel and against 11. It's hard to believe, but through 16 games, because they didn't have the week 17 number or the week 18 numbers in there just yet, the Steelers nickel defense finished first in DVOA against play action and first ahead of Seattle in opponent EPA per dropback. That shocked me because I think of teams that go spread against the Steelers. It forces Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson, sometimes even Malik Harrison into coverage. I think of them as players that, which, is true, regardless of what that number says. They're not good coverage players. They don't get good depth in their drops. That's why the Steelers have been susceptible to throws over the middle. You think of those throws coming off of play action. But the DVOA numbers say that they've handled it really well. And that was a really big surprise to me, especially up there with the likes of Seattle, which is the best nickel team in the NFL, right? Seattle is the number one seed in the NFC, largely because they have Devin Witherspoon. They drafted Nicky Memwari. They have really good coverage linebackers, physical tackling corners and safeties who can fit the run really well. But Mike McDonald never leaves nickel. Like, he's nickel and dime till he dies. He's not going to play base, and he can still stop the run out of it. That also gives him coverage bodies on the field so he doesn't give up the explosive pass, right? The trade-off the Steelers have to make, they give up explosive pass because they want to play so much base and have so many big bodies out there, and they did give up a lot of those explosive passes against the Ravens. Seattle doesn't have to make that trade-off because they can live in nickel and still fit the run. Yet in nickel, DVOA numbers, the Steelers are number one against play action. Not number one overall, but number one against play action. That's a good sign against a quarterback in CJ Stroud, who isn't a play action merchant by any means. But, he's using it on over a quarter of his dropbacks, not a huge number. But he is fourth in the NFL in yards per attempt differential between play action dropbacks and traditional dropbacks, about 1.5 yards difference better with play action compared to just traditional dropback. So To me, the numbers are better than I would have expected. I kind of thought with the explosiveness that the Texans have at receiver, with their ability to, live in 11, hit you with play action, CJ Stroud's aggressiveness over the middle of the field, and maybe it'll play out that way because that's kind of what my eyes tell me is Stroud under center play action stuff against the Steelers nickel, or if they try to play base, and I don't think you can because I just worry about your matchups with those receivers and being able to keep a blanket on things. Because if you want to play base and have a too high shell to keep a lid on Stroud and the explosives, that's so much stress on Queen and Harrison and Wilson to cover the middle of the field, to get depth in their drops. Like a college team that does that really well is Indiana. And obviously they do everything really well, but that's one thing they do specifically amazing is they limit explosive pass out of base defense. And it's because their linebackers are unbelievable in coverage. They get depth so well to keep things in front, to take away those windows or make them hard throws over the middle. It's a different game in college, but it's becoming more similar in recent years, at least offensively. The Steelers just don't have guys that can do that. And a lot of teams don't have guys that can do that. The very few do. So my eyes and my preconceived notion coming in is Stroud's going to kind of shred them there. They're going to take away the run. So if you can force a turnover to, you've probably got to heat things up and blitz them a little bit to try to just force one of those, because I don't think you're going to stop them consistently. The numbers do kind of say otherwise. So I'll be interested to see how that plays out. And ultimately, like, the great equalizer is just trench play. If you have, like, that's the Steelers' biggest advantage in this matchup. So if you have Cam Heyward, a hero game, TJ Watt, a hero game, Highsmith can, Herbig can, Derek Harmon can. All you need is to keep things in front of you, limit them from having those explosives, and you can kill a drive with a sack, right? You can kill a drive with a tackle for loss. That's tough to do, that kind of bend, don't break stuff. Get them in the red zone where things condense a little bit. And okay, Heyward chucks one of the guards off of him, sacks Stroud, and all of a sudden they're settling for 3 and not 7. It's a razor's edge approach, but you're a 3.5 point underdog at home in the first round of the playoffs. So you're not from coming into this matchup from a position of strength. That could be, if the Steelers win this game, I think it needs to be a dominant defensive line performance. But I'm interested. I was interested to find what the numbers said about the Steelers in nickel and how they have a little bit of a better chance to survive against the Texans than I really thought they would have. The other side of the ball, however, feels like a total mismatch. And the numbers, the eye test, everything is going to tell you that. The D'Amico Ryans Texans defense, for all the things they can, like, they're fairly simple schematically. He comes from, the 49ers and just kind of that tree of, we play a 4 down front. We have great defensive linemen who are going to eat your offensive tackles alive. We're going to keep things in front of us, and we are going to punish you. It's not just tackling, because the Texans are such a great tackling defense. They swarm to the ball incredibly well. They don't allow a lot of yards after the catch. They're one of the best in the NFL at that. But they also, like, make you feel it. And the Ravens weren't able to do that to Warren and to Gainwell and to Freiermuth. They were able to get them down, especially once Hamilton got out. That became a difficult proposition as well. But I don't know that the, like, physicality was really there. The Texans are going to have it. The Texans are going to be up for that. The Texans, on your little swings and your screens and stuff, you may get some yards. You're going to pay a price for it. And I think Jaylen Warren is a player who's absolutely up for that. I think Kenneth Gainwell has shown he's a player who's up for that. But it's a different beast, that defense. Houston, number 6 in DVOA against wide receiver ones. That is very important as well. We can get to like the yards after the catch and the running back stuff. DK Metcalf is coming back for this game. You are an offense built around a wide receiver, like a passing game at least, built around checkdowns and a wide receiver one who you need to be like a volume target guy. Even if all year we've talked about that's not really DK's best role, you need him to be a man-to-man beater. You need him to be somebody who can like gobble up targets. And the Texans just don't really allow that. They have Derek Stingley, one of the better cover corners in the NFL, and they just have an offense or a defense that they know they can live with 2 high safeties, so they can put a blanket on things. They have the bodies in coverage to rotate, to bracket, to do the things they need to do to shut down a wide receiver one because they're getting pressure with 4. That's kind of the whole ethos of this thing with DeMeco Ryans. The Texans allow the 3rd fewest receptions per game to wide receiver ones. So there's that volume aspect, right? And the 8th fewest yards per game. So, they give up a couple big plays. I'm not going to like nitpick that discrepancy there. You need DK Metcalf to have 7 to 10 touches in that game to have a chance because there just aren't any other playmakers on the outside for the Steelers. And the Texans shut that off. They take that away. It's hard to siphon targets to a player against a defense that's this good and tackles this well and punishes players. I mean, DK's a big guy. He can handle it, but it's going to be a lot of physicality when he does get the ball in his hands, when he is trying to get yards after the catch. Worse than that, Houston is number 3 in DVOA against tight ends in the passing game and number 1 against running backs. They allow just 4.3 receptions per game and 31.5 yards per game to running backs. So all of the Gainwell and Warren designer touches, the stuff that takes the pressure off the run game, the stuff that takes the pressure off Rodgers, lets him get the ball out of his hands quickly. And while that's like not necessarily high-level quarterback play stuff, he's not standing back there and, just beating you from the pocket with downfield stuff. I think Rodgers has been impressive and obviously effective in that capacity because he's just been so accurate to get the yards after the catch, to get, broken tackles and receivers being able to get their eyes up quickly to make a man miss. You got to be hyper accurate. And Rodgers really has been for most of the year. So, credit to him for that and his ability to keep things on schedule that way, especially on Sunday night. Again, Houston swarms. Like they just aren't going to let you live that way. They're going to make you hit tight window throws. They're going to make you try to challenge them in the middle of the field. You need to scheme things up to get the one-on-ones you want, right? Like it's not just going to be drop back there, read it out, somebody's going to come open. No, you got to be intentional about if you want Kenneth Gainwell to get a one-on-one with Henry To'oTo'o, who is a good player, but is, maybe not the best coverage linebacker. He's given up some big plays, like Ashton Genty hit them for a deep shot when the Raiders played the Texans. And, that was kind of a weird game for Houston, but you got to be intentional about creating those mismatches. And I don't know that Arthur Smith, he's intentional about the players he wants to get the ball, and I tend to think he's very intentional about the places he wants to get it to them. But I don't see him as somebody who's like thinking those matchups so much and trying to create that leverage, whether it be with pre-snap motion or shifting or whatever. Rodgers does a good job with that at the line of scrimmage, but I just don't think of Arthur Smith as somebody who's going to, find the duck out there on defense and just keep attacking him. There really isn't one on this Houston defense, though. But if there is, if you find one, you think you have one, you got to be intentional about creating that advantage because just this check down stuff and getting it out quick, and Rodgers is going to have to get it out quick. We saw him against Cleveland, which is another one of the best pass rushes in the NFL. Like this is Myles Garrett, yes, a force, but Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter. I mean, Will Anderson's almost just as good. Like Myles Garrett's probably another level. Will Anderson is in the conversation right below him. And Danielle Hunter has been fantastic. Both of those guys over 20% pass rush win rate. You like your tackle play better with Dylan Cook, and Fautanu is really rounded into shape. I think he's a long-term answer at right tackle for sure. They got to be stellar. They have to be absolutely stellar for you to have Rodgers stand back there and not finish the game with a 2.12 second time to throw like he did against Cleveland, where he was jumpy in the pocket and jittery, and he looked 42 years old. Because there's it feels like maybe a storybook ending with him throwing that game-winning touchdown to Austin, and Rodgers recaptures his old glory in Pittsburgh and takes the Steelers to the playoffs with a big win against a two-time MVP. There's a chance that the send-off is a little bit ugly, if it is a send-off at all. But there's a chance that it's a little bit ugly in that matchup, because I just think the Texans are going to win in the trenches. They're going to tackle everything, because that's really what the Steelers offense comes down to. Can you tackle them in space 3 times? Right? There's no verticality really to speak of. They tapped into some of it again once Hamilton went out, which is just a tough, that's so difficult to deal with, especially mid-game. If you come into the week knowing you're not going to have a player like that, you can build a game plan for it. But in the middle of the game, somebody comes out like that, where you can't just say, okay, Malachi Starks, now you play the Kyle Hamilton role. He's just such a difference maker. That's not really an option. So, they were able to hit Freiermuth on some seams and hit Thielen for a big shot. But those took great throws from Rodgers and took one of the best defensive players in the NFL being out. I don't know that you get to that stuff quite as well with Houston. So, the Steelers offense, as I said, it comes down to, can you tackle them 3 times? And there's probably not another defense in the NFL that I would bet on to do that over Houston. So, this is going to have to be a really low scoring game for the Steelers to win it, and they're going to have to win the turnover battle pretty soundly. Like Houston, number 5 in the NFL in yards after the catch allowed, 15th in yards after the catch per reception, which is feels like a glimmer of hope, but that's a full year sample. And I would probably favor the raw stat of, total yards after the catch allowed over the rate stat of yards after the catch per reception, because it includes the fact that they just don't allow a lot of receptions at all. And you need to, if your offense is going to be Rodgers doing so much in this quick passing game to be an extension of the run and to get it to Warren and Gainwell in space, you got to complete a lot of passes. Like Rodgers had to throw it 47 times, complete over 30 balls against the Ravens to win on a missed field goal. You have to be completing a lot of passes, unless you're going to go under center and say, I see your 4 down front. I'm putting Spencer Anderson out here, and I'm going to run the crap out of the ball. And I don't know that Rodgers is willing to do that. I think we saw last night, that's not how he's going to go out. Right? That is not how Rodgers is going to go down. He's going to go down throwing it. And I don't love that game plan. I would much rather hand it off to Warren 20 times. Like Warren and Gainwell together, I think, have to get 30 carries in this game. And they haven't come close to that in recent weeks. 30 touches, sure. Carries. It can be pitches. It can be different pinball stuff out of shotgun, like whatever you want to get to. But I think that's going to be your best chance, is to get really big against Houston and see if they have a good answer for it, which they have this year. But if they're going to live with that 4 down front stuff, you can get to some gap scheme runs. Yeah, you want to be a zone run team, but maybe you need to be a little more physical, a little more gap scheme stuff, like use your numbers advantage in the trenches, I still think they'll tackle well. I still think they'll rally to the ball. But I don't think the Steelers can put Rodgers in a situation where he's dropping back 45 times because hits are going to accumulate. He's going to get happy feet in the pocket. And that's when mistakes happen. You have to win the turnover battle in this one. Like, I'm speaking Mike Tomlin's language, which I've criticized him for a long time for being so turnover averse and, oh, the only way you can win games is the turnover battle. Like, I don't think you should build your team that way, but that's how you've built it. So you got to follow those tenets if you're going to pull an upset at home on Monday night. I think it's going to be a really fun game. Obviously, I mean, the Steelers are in the playoffs and it hasn't been pretty. We talked about it last night. Like, the Steelers are 0-5 in their last five playoff appearances. Haven't had a lot of success under Mike Tomlin since, 2016 is their last playoff win. Their last 3 playoff wins have come against AJ McCarron, Matt Moore, and Alex Smith. It's been a really long time since that 2010 trip to the Super Bowl when they actually kind of ran through some teams in the playoffs. And to the Mike Tomlin of it all, if you don't win this game, I still think there should be a parting of ways. I think it's a natural breaking point. You have Rodgers. He's 42 years old. Maybe he's going to want to come back, but I don't want to sign up for another year of that. I'd much rather go and try to sign a Malik Willis, and we can talk about all this offseason stuff after the season does end, whether that be next week or the week after. I'm not even going to say the week after that. It's not going to happen. I'd rather have a younger offensive-minded coach who is interested in developing a quarterback, who is going to, just be more aggressive, be more cutting edge. But you got to hand it to Tomlin. He's got the Steelers back in the playoffs. Now do something with it, right? You can change that narrative right now. You beat CJ Stroud, one of the better young quarterbacks in the NFL, one of the best defenses. It's wide open in the AFC this year. I don't think that includes the Steelers. I don't think the Steelers are a legitimate Super Bowl or even AFC title game contender. I don't see it that way. Change my mind. Change a lot of minds. That opportunity is there for Tomlin to really reinvigorate this thing, for Rodgers to say, I got another year in me, come back, let's run it back, get me another receiver, let's see what we can do. But to me, if they don't win this game, regardless of what it looks like, honestly, I would much rather have a clean slate than either Rodgers coming back and, okay, you draft a receiver in the first round. We saw what Rodgers was like with young receivers in Green Bay and in New York. He doesn't like them. And here, Roman Wilson, completely in the doghouse. That's a product of Aaron Rodgers. He wants older guys, veterans out there that he trusts, that he knows, are going to be in the right place and are going to speak his language and everything. But that puts a huge cap on your offensive ceiling because you don't have playmakers on the outside. So, okay, he runs it back. You draft a wide receiver. You try to bolster things, offensively, see if you can get a corner, some help in the secondary, and you do it again. To me, that team doesn't have anywhere close to a Super Bowl ceiling. So what are you doing? If you do even wipe the slate clean roster-wise or quarterback-wise, and you sign Malik Willis or you draft a young quarterback, you trade up and go get one, I don't want Mike Tomlin to be the guy developing him. So this game is a legitimate crossroads in my mind. It felt that way on Sunday night. That felt like a real crossroads. And now Baltimore is in a place where the Ravens might be, moving on from John Harbaugh and finally able to just, change things up after 18 years. The Steelers are going on 19 years with with Mike Tomlin. Harbaugh was hired a year later. That felt like a breaking point for Baltimore. Maybe it'll come. We'll find out. The Steelers might have their own on Monday night, but we'll see. I'm really excited for it. I'll be back for an instant reaction show on Monday night. We have another show this week as well with Tommy Jagai, expert on StillCurtain.com. Check out all their great content on StillCurtain.com, and Shane Kubis, Still Curtain contributor. He's doing a lot of great work in the FanSided division. Check out the instant reaction from last night. You can check out my written work and podcast work by following me on Blue Sky at Yourish3. I'll pull that up on the YouTube. Like and subscribe. We've got a lot of playoff content coming for you. We might even have another preview show next Monday. We'll have to keep you posted on that, but make sure you're following Still Curtain anywhere you can on social media and following me on Blue Sky at Yourish3. That's going to do it for this Monday edition of the Still Curtain podcast. Steelers in the playoffs. We'll see how it goes. Have a great week, and as always, go Steelers.